Welcome back to the class of macroeconomics. In today's class, we are going to talk more on the Keynesian model. So the topics that we are going to address are as follows. We are going to ask, is there any examples for how to come up with the Islm analysis? And is there any other Keynesian model? And the answers are yes for both questions. So the outline for today is as follows. We are going to talk about 3 examples for how to come up with the Keynesian equilibrium by using the Islm model. The first example I want to talk about is when there is an increase in money supply, how does it affect the Islm equilibrium in the short run and in the long run? We also want to talk about when there is a temporary positive productivity shock and when there is a permanent positive productivity shock, how does it affect the Is and Lm equilibrium in the short run and in the long run. And then we are going to introduce the ADAS model and then talk about the misperception theory, which can be think about as a more advanced version of the ADAS model. So now before we start to talk about the examples, let's review the equilibrium of the Islm analysis we learned last time. We said that in the short run, we assume that the labor market adjusts slowly. Therefore, the labor market can be off the equilibrium in the short run, and the firms are still willing to produce enough output to meet the aggregated demand for goods. The implication for this result is that only the goods market and the asset market, which can be boiled down to the money market, are in the equilibrium in the short run. So then, in terms of the Islm and full employment line, we focus on the intersection of the Is curve and the Lm curve when we want to come up with the short-run equilibrium. How about the Islm equilibrium in the long run? In the long run, we assume that all the markets are in equilibrium but allow the price changes. Therefore, after all the market response, the price, which is the P, will change at the end to restore the general equilibrium. Therefore, in terms of the Islm curve and the full employment line, we focus on the intersection of the full employment line and the Is curve. And then at the last stage, the Lm curve needs to move to hit the intersection of the full employment line and the Is curve, which implies that the economy restores the general equilibrium by adjusting the price. Therefore, the Lm curve moves the last to restore the general equilibrium. So now what we want to do next is that we want to start with our first example. The first example we want to talk about is when there is an increase in the money supply, that is when the government prints a lot of money such that increase the total money supply. We want to explore how does that affect the Ism-Lm equilibrium. To answer this question, we need to separate the case into the short-run analysis and the long-run analysis. In the short run, what happened is that we need to first draw the Islm curve, and then we know in the short run, we focus only on the intersection of the Is curve and the Lm curve. Therefore, we don't need to worry too much about the full employment line. When the quantity of money supply increase, how does it affect the Is curve? Given that it only affects the quantity of money supply, it doesn't affect the saving decision and the investment decision. Therefore, the Is curve stays. However, the quantity of money supply increases. When the quantity of money supply increases, it will cause the R to fall. Therefore, it causes a right shift of the Lm curve. So that is what's happened in the short run, that the Lm curve shifts to the right. And then we know we don't need to talk about what happened to a full employment line because in the short run, we allow the labor market to be off the equilibrium in the short run. In fact, if the economy starts from the general equilibrium, then at the beginning, before the shock, the economy is having the three lines crossing together because we know that will be the only point that all the markets in equilibrium. Then when the government start to print a lot of money, the S curve stays the same, the LM curve shifts to the right. And then we find a new intersection, which is the point in here. That is, the R falls temporarily and the Y increases temporarily. But then in the short run, that the labor market is off the equilibrium because the intersection red dot is not on the full employment line. Therefore, the labor market is not in equilibrium in the short run. So then what happened in the long run? Well, in the long run, what we know is that the S curve still stays the same because nothing happens to the saving and investment decisions. But then what we know is that in the long run, we need to look at the full employment line. Given that the changes in the money supply has nothing to do with the labor market equilibrium, therefore the full employment line also stays the same. Then this result tells us that in the long run, the economy will attain a new equilibrium, which is the intersection of the IS curve and the full employment line, which is the original point in here. But then what happened to the LM curve? We know that in the long run, all the market need to be in equilibrium. IS curve stays, the full employment line stays. So the intersection is determined already by the full employment line and the IS curve. But then we know that the money market also need to be in equilibrium in the long run. And the LM curve need to move back to the original position such that the money market will be able to restore the equilibrium. So what we know is that in order to attain the general equilibrium, the LM curve has to shift to the left. So then in what direction the price change will shift the LM curve to the left? It turned out that when the price got changed, holding all the other things being equal, the real money supply should fall. The equilibrium tells us that the economy will be able to attain a higher R. Because of that, the LM curve need to shift leftward. So then we know that when there is an increase in the money supply, because the LM curve needs to shift to the left, therefore we know the price has to increase. Because of the price increase, then it makes the LM curve back from the red to the purple, which was the original point. So then this result tells us when the government prints money, in the short run, it may be able to reduce the real interest rate and increases the output. However, in the long run, R goes back and the Y goes back. And then the only thing got different is that the price increases. This result is consistent with our quantity theory of money that we know when the price increases, it can be just because the government prints too much money. Therefore, this Islm analysis tells us that in the short run, printing money may help the economy to boost the economy, but in the long run, it will not be able to boost the economy, but the side effect is that the price needs to go up. So this result is consistent with what we have been talking about. We said that changes in the money supply will not affect anything real, but it will only affect the nominal thing, which is the nominal money supply. So then we know that the money is neutral in the long run, and it is also illustrated in here under the Islm equilibrium.